I was awakened the next morning at the ungodly hour of 10:45, yanked into consciousness by the sound of the telephone ringing. The voice on the other end of the phone turned out to be Mr. Ketchum, who naturally had no way of knowing that I had not made it to bed until close to 6 a.m. Mr. Ketchum offered to take me to lunch at his favorite restaurant and for a tour of Terre Haute. I mumbled my acceptance, dragged myself into the shower, and met Mr. Ketchum in the lobby at noon. Hi, I'm Neal A. Yeager. Today I'm reading from my novella, The Next Seattle. This is a book about musicians forming a music scene in the late 1990s, and the book was written around that same time. And so were most of those songs that you're hearing. I know it's pretty obvious. After each chapter, you're hearing a song. Those are songs that I wrote and recorded and around the same time. So they really work together, and I'm really proud of how that all turned out. And so I hope you're enjoying those songs. You can buy copies of them on Bandcamp. They're also at most of the streaming places, but I don't know if you know this. A lot of people don't. You know, obviously everybody likes streaming music, but when you look at it from the other side, from as an independent artist, say you buy an artist's song. Usually the standard price is $1 or 99 cents or whatever. $1, like for iTunes and Bandcamp, the musician gets about 70 cents of that dollar, right? You buy it for $1, the musician gets 70 cents. If you stream that song, the musician gets between 1/3 and 1/2 of 1 penny. So that's why most musicians like Bandcamp. You know, Bandcamp has gotten very popular, bandcamp.com, and that's a good reason. You know, you don't make any money off of streaming. So anyway, I should get off that topic. But anyway, it's available all over the place. So is this book. And let me get on to it. This is chapter 11, The Quad. After a very tasty, but I'm quite sure artery-clogging lunch at Mr. Ketchum's favorite restaurant, we walked about the campus of Indiana State University. Now, this has been built up pretty much in the last few years, said Mr. Ketchum, pointing to an area which he said was called the Quad, which was where we now strolled. All this stuff wasn't even here before. Well, I mean, there's always been buildings and like here, but all those additions you see there are fairly new. The place looked pretty much the same for as long as anyone could remember it. Then a few years ago, they up and decided that they just had to build some stuff. Looks a lot different now. They've got a pretty good library too. What do you say I show it to you? He said, and we turned to exit the Quad. I spend more time reading than I used to now that I sold my business and retired. We walked on for a bit in silence. As we walked, I once again couldn't help feeling that something was creeping into my system. I liked Mr. Ketchum, and his daughter, I suppose. I had spent my entire life pushing people away, and now I felt as though I was being pulled in. Mr. Ketchum was a naturally likable guy. I had discovered that he had been an insurance salesman. Looking at his build, I had assumed he did something physical for a living, but no. He somehow managed to be both desk-bound and strong. Strange. But I'm sure that his likable personality helped in his line of work. And Samantha? Well, if for nothing else, I liked her for getting on the nerves of the magazine's management, which had come down so hard on me with such a force of righteousness. It gave me a slight thrill of delight to see this young woman who had put me to shame as the thorn in their side. Ah, she's so much like her mom, it's scary, said Mr. Ketchum. Is that good or bad? I asked. I guess it's a little of both. Like most things in this life, a little good, a little bad, that adds up to life. Mr. Ketchum paused, looking up at one of the towering sycamore trees. Her mother wanted to be a singer. A singer, really? Yep, she wanted to be a singer. She had the talent, she had the voice, she had the personality, but Mr. Ketchum trailed off, his eyes refracting sunlight in a way that said his thoughts were somewhere else. Suddenly, he snapped back to where he was. She wanted to go to San Francisco. Of course, that's where it was all happening at that time, San Francisco, the whole summer of love silliness, he said. Now, we got married right out of high school, and I went to work selling insurance for old man Henderson. I had worked for Henderson close to a decade when he asked me if when he did retire, would I be interested in buying the business from him. Now, I was 27, and here was this great plan that had dropped right in front of me. I couldn't just see chucking it all and heading out to San Francisco. Well, I suppose that would have been hard. And besides, all the pictures of those people I had seen, they looked like a bunch of real weirdos to me. All that hippie stuff. I began to laugh. Mark smiled and continued. I see you laughing there, David. Now, don't get me wrong. I am a fairly tolerant man. Live and let live. I got nothing particularly against weirdos. As long as they ain't hurting anybody, I say if you want to be a weirdo, by all means, have a ball. But what I'm saying is that I didn't want to become one. I didn't want to go live with a bunch of them. I couldn't see dropping my sensible business in a town where I had grown up to go off and join some hippie weirdos. I just couldn't see it. But your wife could see it. Yeah, she could see it all right. It was all she could see. It was her dream. Mr. Ketchum paused as if his awareness had just gone off somewhere else again. Somewhen else. It was her dream. Out of respect for what seemed to be a personal moment, I said nothing as we walked along. Eventually, we arrived at the library building. In the grass before it was a large, modern metal sculpture that was supposed to be God knows what. We stopped, and I pretended to look at the sculpture. After a moment, Mr. Ketchum looked up at me. He fixed me with the kind of gaze that only the wise can master, and calmly said, "There's something fishy going on here, isn't there?" I flinched. Fishy? You. Something about you and this thing you're doing, something doesn't feel right. After a moment to regain my composure, I looked back at Mr. Ketchum and said, "Well, what makes you say that, Mark?" "A hunch," he replied. "A hunch."
Splintered matches, hot wired, darkness, blasted atoms, tinsel arrangements. Dawn is coming. Dawn is coming for me. Dawn is coming. Dawn is coming, and will not wait for cascading, golden, choking embers, blue ring cathodes, igniting forever. Dawn is coming. Dawn is coming for me. Dawn is coming. Dawn is coming, and will not wait for. Take it, the darkness unfolded past violet. Feel it in shambles and make it forever. Dawn is coming. Dawn